Happy Valentine's Day, and welcome to the beginning of Lent. Today is also Ash Wednesday, and we'll have worship at 7 o'clock tonight in the sanctuary and streaming online. The rest of our Lenten services will be in the school gym, with a meal at 6 o'clock and worship at 7. Those services will not be streamed since we don't have that capability in the gym. Our Lenten services this year will feature a drama called Christ on Trial, where a skeptical prosecuting attorney puts on the stand various witnesses to Jesus. The drama will ask, who is Christ to us, and what difference does he make in our lives? Over the past couple of weeks in our One Year Chronological Bible reading challenge, we've been making our way through the book of Exodus. We heard the story of God delivering his people from 400 years of slavery in Egypt. He sent Moses and Aaron to tell Pharaoh to let their people go. When Pharaoh refused, God sent 10 different plagues upon Egypt and then opened up the Red Sea to let his people pass to safety. Pharaoh and the pursuing Egyptian army were drowned when the Red Sea closed over them. At Mount Sinai, God formed the Israelites into his covenant people, giving them the 10 Commandments and other rules to govern their life together. All of the laws served to protect their relationships with God and each other so that they could thrive as a community. Some of the laws seem kind of primitive or barbaric to us, but like capital punishment and eye for an eye and so forth. But of course they seem primitive. They were living in primitive times. We have to compare their laws not with our modern day laws, but with the laws and practices of other cultures at the time. There are some similarities, but also remarkable differences. For example, the laws given at Mount Sinai showed much more respect to women and slaves. They provided justice for them. They weren't just to be treated like property for the husband or king to do what he pleased with. These laws were at least a click forward. Like an eye for an eye limited the cycle of revenge. Instead of just going round and round and round and getting worse, people doing more than what had been done to them, this limited revenge. The Israelites were also to show justice to neighbors and even enemies and foreigners. It said, "Do not oppress a foreigner, for you yourselves know how it feels to be foreigners, because you were foreigners in Egypt." The people were to take Sabbath rest, not only for themselves, but for their servants, and even for the land. They were to let the land rest in the 7th year. They were to celebrate festivals to remind them of what God had done for them. God promised to gradually drive out other nations from the promised land. He gave them strict warnings not to worship the gods of other nations. The Israelites promised to do everything the Lord had commanded them. Moses went up on the mountain for 40 days and nights. God gave Moses detailed instruction on how to build a special tent of meeting so God could dwell with his people wherever they went. The tent was to be a portable temple where heaven and earth met, where God spoke with Moses, and where Aaron and the priests interceded for the people. The priests were to wear specially made garments with an ephod that had 12 different precious stones for the 12 tribes, and the Urim and the Thummim, which were sacred lots that they could cast to discern God's will. God gave Moses the stone tablets with the 10 Commandments written on them. Moses went down the mountain and found the people had turned away from God in their impatience and asked Aaron to make new gods for them to follow, a golden calf. Moses was so angry that he smashed the stone tablets. He broke all 10 commandments at once. He ground the golden calf into powder, threw it on the water, and made the people drink it. So their idol ended up in the latrine. Thousands of people died for their rebellion. Then Moses went back up the mountain to receive two new commandments from God. While he was there, he boldly asked God to show him his glory. And so the moon. When Moses went back down to the camp, his face was shining from being in God's presence. He had to cover it so that the people wouldn't be afraid of him. We heard that when Peter, James, and John saw Jesus' face shining with God's glory as he talked with Moses and Elijah on the mountain. In the last several chapters of Exodus, the Spirit of God enabled master Ark of the Covenant, the altar, the tent, and all its furnishings. Reading through all those descriptions twice over can seem almond blossoms and pomegranates, gold and gemstones, the stone tablets with the Ten Commandments, a jar of manna, Aaron's staff which had budded and bloomed, and images of the cherubim who guard the way to Eden. Everyone gave generously and worked together to build the tent of meeting and all its furnishings. And they had more than enough. Moses even had to tell the people to stop bringing gifts. We have some amazing craftsmen in our congregation as well, including Ralph Ewald, who recently made removable wooden railings to help people as they make their way up to the communion rail. Our sanctuary is a beautiful space with all sorts of Christian symbolism that points us toward God's goodness. We have generous people at St. Peter's who give faithfully and provide what is needed not only for our buildings and special projects, but for all of our needs and mission as a congregation and school. It's amazing to see how through your gifts, God provides everything we need. I'm sure he'll do so again with our next big project, replacing 3 of the large HVAC units at our school. I'm so grateful for all of you and your partnership in mission. It seems like God is always out ahead of us, providing for our current ministry and new opportunities. It's exciting to see what God is doing through us. The Bible Project has a fascinating video on the second half of Exodus in their Torah series. I'm putting a link to it in the description of this post. They point out that at the end of Exodus, when the tabernacle and the tent of meeting were dedicated, the glory of God filled the tent, and Moses was unable to enter it. That's how the book ends. Wait a minute. Wasn't the whole point of building the tent of meeting for God to be able to dwell with his people? Yes, but there was a problem. While Moses was on the mountain receiving the commandments and the blueprints for the tent of meeting, the people rebelled and abandoned God, breaking the command not to worship other gods. Sinful people cannot enter God's presence. They need their sin to be covered and washed away. The whole next book, Leviticus, shows how God dealt with that problem and gave the people a way for their sin to be forgiven and their relationship with him to be restored. Ash Wednesday, which we will celebrate tonight, begins with a special time of confession and forgiveness, where we receive ashes in the shape of a cross on our foreheads or on the backs of our hands. Ashes are an ancient symbol of repentance. They remind us that we are dust. We will return to dust, and from dust we will rise again. Hope to see you in person tonight at 7 and on Sunday morning at 8:30 or 11 o'clock in person or online. There's no Sunday school this weekend, but we will have adult class between worship at 9:45 in the meeting room, where we will conclude our series on Epic, the story God is telling. See you soon.